You wanna hear a crazy stat? I've been making videos for 13 years.
Wow.
I've been making League videos for 12 years.
Wow.
And this is my number 1,000.
1,000.
Alright, enough for the break, back to the grind.
Yep.
Whenever I get to talk about the Riot MMO, I have to be wary of the fact that the people who like these videos the most do not come from League of Legends.
True.
In fact, believe it or not, but most of that audience comes from World of
Bro, not a single League player I talk to knows the lore.
Warcraft. Not only is this apparent by the amount of WoW creators reacting to my videos, which I'm totally fine with, but also here is a more statistical proof. And so, for all of you who came here from outside the normal sphere, if we want to talk about what happened to Riot's MMO, we have to talk about the big news that arrived from League's narrative team.
Okay.
It all started last week with a new drop from League's dev team, where outside of the normal news drops and new champion teasers, after a very long time, we got an update on what is happening to League's lore. For all of you who are unaware, for the last year and a half, the lore of League of Legends got essentially frozen, with the last story that would expand the League of Legends universe, which is not connected to a new champion release, being released in June 2022.
The boys and Bombolini.
After which, without any announcements...
Bro, where is this webpage? I've played plenty of League. I have never seen this page before.
League's lore just stopped getting updated.
Like, does Riot just like not push the lore onto the player base? They just keep it separate? Just keep the lore nerds in one corner and they just let them do their own thing. And then everybody else just talks about the gameplay and LCS and stuff.
And from that point on, the only development on this universe we got were new cards from Legends of Runeterra.
I think they learned that like the lore didn't sell skins. It was just like K-pop and freaking, I don't know, professional games and stuff and Faker. They sell the skins.
As well as 2 new games from Riot Forge.
Okay.
It still sounds good enough,
The
but
Silas game seemed pretty cool. I didn't get to see it, play it though.
Context. On top of that, in the past, we used to get about 20 or 30 short stories per year. So naturally, over time, the lore community went through the 7 stages of grief. Starting with frustration and ending with acceptance.
I feel like the League of Legends community, every part of the League of Legends community is permanently in the grief stage.
And eventually, after that very long time, we finally got an update. It was an update that on paper didn't seem that big, but in fact...
Talks about how the lore in their card game is pretty much their lore department. They have a card game? I don't even know that League has a card game. Like...
It is so significant that I turned those 2 minutes of news into a 30-minute long video. Among these short news, we learned that Riot is dropping short stories. Because truth be told, people are too lazy to read and...
Yes. Well, it's not only that people are too lazy to read, but also people don't even know that this exists.
Almost nobody engaged with them, which, even though my job used to rely on those, I have to agree with it. These days, if a story is not narrated, people won't care.
True.
I mean, look at today's youth. They won't stand...
This is why you have to make a video about it like this.
And a narrated video if it is over 10 seconds long. So instead, Riot will focus their stories onto the bigger projects. Be it bigger cinematics or gameplay events. But this is also connected to another big piece of information. The one that from...
What they should do, like, you know how like Overwatch bakes in a lot of the lore into character voice lines between each other? What if they did that? That would be so cool.
Now on, everything that...
I know they do a little bit of it, but like, it's nowhere near on the level that Overwatch has the number of voice lines between characters.
Comes out from League's IP will be...
League does it, but it's very subtle and it's small, right? You might kill a character, they'll drop like a one-liner, like 2 words, like hardly anything, right? And then you go, but they should re-drop in like more than that. They should totally drop more than that. Like have the characters talk a lot more in game.
In one unified universe. Because for those of you who don't know, that is not how the lore used to function. League of Legends...
Overwatch is a bad example, but I remember when the game initially came out, I thought that was like one of the coolest things.
Used to be a bit more like a multiverse. Now, I have never seen the Avengers in my life, but from...
I think like the original Overwatch cinematics did a really good job. League of Legends cinematics do a really good job too. So, I mean, I think that that's a good way to promote the lore that the player base would like actually enjoy and like spread around. Like, I know like Overwatch Dragons and stuff like that. Like, I've probably seen that cinematic like 10 times.
What I've been told, it functions a little bit like the MCU. The core canon universe is the one that was connected to League of Legends.
Okay.
And all its lore came from a website called Universe, which is where you can also find the interactive map.
Wow.
But from
Bro, I didn't even know that existed.
this core universe, you had other versions that would branch out. For example, Arcane was never canon in the core universe.
Crazy.
In fact, the differences in the stories between Arcane and League of Legends are quite big. Which is why the video where I explained those differences was so popular. But on the other side, we also had Legends of Runeterra, a card game rooted in League's universe.
Oh, that's what it's called.
Which also brought up things which were never mentioned in the core universe. And so...
Wait, is it like a physical card game or is it just purely digital? Because I don't know anybody that talks... Literally nobody ever talks about Legends of Runeterra.
Legends of Runeterra was also considered
I thought that was the freaking mobile game.
different version of the core universe.
Okay.
But now, with the news we were given, it was confirmed that all of these are being united.
Alright.
So that everything can be canon. Now,
Alright.
of course, this would mean that
Surely the fighting game won't come out and destroy the lore some more, right? And make that non-canon as well, right? Because that never happens.
some parts of some of the universes have to be retconned. Because only one true version of the story has to make it through.
Yeah.
Which is why, in some parts, there is a little bit of a confusion in the community.
Yeah.
But in fact, it was confirmed that Arcane is now fully canon.
Wow.
With Legends of Runeterra being second in priority. Because it was confirmed that the vast majority of that game is already in line with the new universe. Which means that these two together will overwrite everything else that came from the core universe.
Okay.
Now, I understand that all of this sounds a bit complex.
Yes.
But there is a very good reason.
And why are they doing all this? To make the League of Legends MMO. Please tell me it's because they're making the MMO.
Why Riot is doing this. On one side, it is a bit of a reaction to feedback.
Yeah.
Because no matter where you went, people either didn't know about the multiverses and they thought that Arcane was fully canon,
Yeah.
or they knew about the different versions of the story, but because Arcane was so good, they wanted it to be canon.
True.
So with this merging, you're gonna be satisfying most of your audience.
People do that.
Which by
It's
the
like the most popular option is usually just heralded as like the true version or like the right one because like that's just what most people agree on.
way now also means that by watching Arcane, you're just teasing yourself for the MMO. But the other reason why this happened, and arguably the more important one...
What I'm worried about is that like, if they're doing all these changes, prepping for like the MMO, I just hope the MMO is going to be good and the MMO is going to be successful, right? Because all the other Riot games are not necessarily like MOBA gamers and FPS gamers, like the two most popular, League of Legends and Valorant. Not necessarily, like FPS players don't really play MMOs. Like when people were playing classic WoW, when people were playing old school RuneScape, those people were not playing, you know, talking about FaZe Clan and Modern Warfare 2. Okay, there was like two different crowds, right? One of them were on PC and one of them were on console, right? And now a lot of console gamers are growing up and got PCs, now they're playing Valorant, right? But I'm wondering like how good the conversion rate between the current Riot games to the Riot Games MMO is going to be. Or if the Riot Games MMO is going to be mostly MMO players who have just always kind of like have a bit of an interest in the lore, right? Like you said, like a lot of the League of Legends lore people are World of Warcraft gamers, right? And then they'll play the MMO because they like MMOs and they already like the League of Legends IP is just so famous that they'll just know, right? Like they'll know all the characters and stuff like that already.
Is that this is a setup for Riot's future games. Right now, besides Riot Forge, there are 3 big games related to Runeterra which Riot is working on.
Okay.
The fighting game nicknamed Project L, a kind of a forgotten top-down fighter called Project F, which we still have no
I've never heard of this one, Omega Lol.
information on besides that very short clip.
This is an ARPG.
And of course, the long-awaited MMO.
Hell yeah.
But the amazing thing about these games is that now, with the news that arrived, we now know that all of these will be connected. The places we'll see will exist across all the games.
Yeah.
The characters will be consistent no matter where they appear. And their story and motivations should be linked in some way.
Can they stop naming all the games Project? Wasn't Valorant like called Project something, some letter too? Did they just name all their games Project and then pick a letter out of the alphabet? Is the MMO, don't tell me the MMO is going to be called Project M. That'd be Omega Lol.
Of course, that is unless it gets overwritten with gameplay. Now, I know that all of this may sound
Wow, it's the fucking Fire Nation, dude. The Fire Nation is attacking.
insane, and perhaps a little bit far-fetched, because it may not seem like a big deal. But that is where Riot disagrees.
Okay.
Because a very important detail is that Riot announced that they now have what they call League's IP team.
Alright.
With their job being to oversee everything that comes out of League's IP and make sure that all the stories that come out are consistent.
That's good. That's a good idea to have to make sure nothing gets jumbled up in the future. Because having to fix these problems with the lore and the IP later is so much more work than making sure it's right in the first place. So having a team to work on that long-term vision is really smart.
One singular universe. Or again, in other words, there is a whole team that is dedicated to make sure everything is canon and everything is consistent.
Okay.
So going forward, from today, all new storytelling is going to be part of one shared canon, rather than a jumble of different experiences that are similar but inconsistent.
That's good.
And our goal is to ensure that...
I wonder how well they actually keep that up, though, because it's a pretty tall ask. When you have so many different teams in different places working on different projects, it's pretty tough to reel them all in and to make sure every voice line, every script, every character interaction makes sense.
Major events in our stories, as well as the essence of what makes a champion who they are, will be reflected across everything that Riot makes.
Which, as it turns out, should be a big deal for Riot's MMO.
Yeah.
So let me explain how it's related to that. You see, in the past, when I was working on the Riot MMO videos, we always talked about everything as a hypothetical. We knew what existed in the universe. And so we were able to pick out all the things Riot might put into their game.
Yeah.
Did you catch it?
Yeah, you know what? You know what game should have had an IP team? Overwatch, because the whole Kiriko age drama, like how did that make it through?
No matter what we talked about, be it the base world, the races and classes, the bosses and villains, the loot, or even the mounts.
Wow.
They were always things Riot might put into their game. Because we always assumed that the MMO will be a twist on their universe. But now we know there will be no twists. Not with the IP team.
The MMO is going to be like the defining characteristic of the universe.
Overlooking it. Now, what's even better is that if you go back to those videos, you'll see that for the majority of the examples, I showed you things from Legends of Runeterra, which was confirmed to be one of the foundations of the new universe.
Okay.
Which means that all those...
Whoa, what is that? Is that an Earth Dragon? Dude, that is so cool.
Videos became way less hypothetical and way more like a guideline for what is Riot trying to recreate. Or in other words, somehow those videos became a lot more relevant. Which is funny because one of the big critiques I got for those videos was that they were awful because Riot's MMO was just one big mystery and I was making stuff up. So was I now? To put this into context,
I mean, if you know enough about all the different sections, all the lore everywhere, you could make some pretty damn good speculation on what's going to be covered in the MMO.
for WoW's audience, if we go back to 2002,
Okay.
oh god, we are old.
Wow.
Back to when Warcraft 3 was released.
Yeah.
If you look at all the world building that came with it, you'll see that since then, things changed. Especially if you look at the world map.
Yep.
The Warcraft 3 map was vastly different from what made it into WoW. In a way, people consider the WoW version an upgrade and an evolution over what came before. But when you break it down, it also became an alternative take on the world.
You know what this map reminds me of? It reminds me of Mushoku Tensei. Jobless Reincarnation. The map on that one. Doesn't it look kind of like this? There's like the Demon Continent and then the Western Continent, and then it connects across the south and stuff.
That made more sense story-wise and gameplay-wise. Because the map was reconstructed so that leveling and traveling around made more sense. But at the end of the day, there was still a lot of canon story that happened on the old layout. And well, for the longest time, this is how we thought Riot's MMO would work. When it comes out, there would be some changes to the story and the world, so that the MMO wouldn't run into gameplay issues.
The author played a lot of WoW. That makes sense.
Which means it wouldn't really be a one-to-one recreation of what we had. Exactly like what happened.
Good thing he wasn't playing as a Tauren or anything like that. Otherwise, we would have gone mad bestiality and Mushoku Tensei.
Between Warcraft 3 and WoW. But now we know that
We didn't get any
Riot
of
is
that.
planning ahead of time. And they are setting up their new universe so that there would have to be only a minimum of changes. And so that they can try and go for a one-to-one recreation. Now, is it realistic that Riot will succeed at this? Somewhat.
I hope so.
If Arcane told us anything, it is that Riot can really pay attention to the tiniest details.
Yeah, they can. Riot with Arcane proved that they can tell a really damn good story. And a lot of people overlook how important that is. But in a good MMO, if you look at something like Heavensward, right, from Final Fantasy XIV, for years and years and years and years and years, the story from Heavensward has paid so many dividends and boosted the game in the eyes of the players so much, right? A damn good story will spread like wildfire. And Arcane did that really well.
But for the sake of good gameplay, I'm not gonna nitpick some of the changes. So now, with all of this said, Legends of Runeterra kinda became a blueprint for the Riot MMO. Think of it like an archive.
Like you can get people that were totally not in the gaming sphere and not in the League of Legends sphere to watch Arcane, right? Even not in the anime sphere, they would have watched it.
Concept art that Riot will try to
really
put
good.
into their MMO. Sure, I think everyone can agree that Legends of Runeterra has a lot going on, so not everything will be part of the MMO. At least at launch. Because during my interview with the MMO team, they said that their ultimate goal is to recreate the Runeterra that we know. Funnily enough, they probably said it while knowing that Riot will be changing how the universe works. So they probably knew those words would have some weight. Even though back then, I definitely didn't. Which also means that everything I showed you in my videos might as well be real. Which kinda came as a surprise to me as well, to be honest. When you have a look at the mounts, the question is no longer, will they put this dog into their game? The question now shifted to, how will this dog appear in their game? Because now we know that dog is somewhere in that world. When it comes to all the big bosses and villains, the question is no longer, who will they pick to be in the MMO? And it's gonna be more about, how will we meet Viego, the greatest villain in this universe? That's unless you count Mordekaiser. Not to mention that when I was hypothetically talking about all the loot and all the legendary weapons that exist in this universe, well, now they should consistently exist in that universe. Which suddenly gives the entire arsenal from the Ruined King a whole new meaning.
What I think though is that like, I would imagine that most of the legendary stuff that belongs to a lot of the League characters and stuff like that are going to be somewhat unobtainable, right? And then they're going to introduce new items into the MMO, which we'll be able to like, the players will eventually strive for, right? And then only a few of the items that are really famous from the lore, from the other, because you know, it wouldn't make a whole lot of sense to like get like Riven's Blade on your character. To see everybody walking around with like Riven's Blade would not make any sense, right?
So I would recommend playing a class that can use two-handed maces, because when we fight Mordekaiser, he better drop Nightfall.
He better.
And lastly, with perhaps the coolest connection to these news, we have to mention the locations. If the IP team is making sure that everything is consistent, with a pretty high confidence, I can tell you that we are extremely likely to find some of the iconic places we know about in the MMO.
Bro, I'm going straight to Mount Targon in the MMO.
But what's even cooler is that Arcane
Mount Targon is like the coolest place, man.
On the same list too. So I can't wait to explore something like the last drop. Because no matter how or when that place will be implemented, now we simply know that place will be there. So, to finish off this video, I just wanted to tell you that all the Riot MMO videos which I made, which people thought were totally random, suddenly got a lot more real. Just keep in mind that I am actually not confirming anything. I mean, now we know that all the things that appear everywhere will...
Wow, and I think about it, it's probably going to be like classic WoW style, where depending on like your origin story, you'll spawn a different iconic city throughout the entire world and stuff. Oh man, that's going to be cool.
Will be in that world somewhere. But that doesn't mean everything will really be there. Because at that point, the scope of the entire MMO would be unrealistic. Think of it like, we knew that Arthas was somewhere in Warcraft 3, so he was in the world, which meant that someday he would come to WoW. That is how we should treat all the information. It's basically, everything is on the table right now. But more on that, since now we learned that everything around League of Legends is connected. In a way, literally everything that comes out will reveal a piece of the MMO. Meaning that even though, for example...
There's gonna be so much freaking content in the MMO, it's gonna be ridiculous.
Legends of Runeterra is not really making money for Riot, because it is so ridiculously free-to-play friendly. That entire game suddenly got a whole new meaning for Riot. Because even though it may not be a profit-driven game, it is a game that is driving the universe forward. Meaning that it is still giving value to everything else Riot is working on. But also, more importantly, even the cinematics will show us what's going to be in the MMO. Because yes, it was confirmed that some of the previous cinematics are canon in the new universe, which most likely means that Awaken and The Call are canon, and even all the future cinematics, including the one that will feature Aatrox, will be canon too. Which also means...
Oh, speaking of new lore, rip the old Aatrox, man.
The new cinematic that's coming at the beginning of 2024, featuring the Godslayer, will generate...
One of the top laner I used to play with was an Aatrox main, old Aatrox main, and he was so sad when they reworked Aatrox. He kept on saying that they should have just released a new character with the new Aatrox kit and kept the old Aatrox, because he was so sad.
Some hype for the MMO. Because again, in a way, all of these parts are consistent across that one universe. So it technically all serves as the MMO marketing. This is by far the best benefit of this new universe. Literally everything that comes out of the singular League IP will serve as hype to promote everything else that is also part of the IP. So we may not be getting any news from Riot's MMO, but in a way, we are. This also means that this guy stays fully canon now. So we may find him in the MMO one day. But of course, since the hype for Riot's MMO reignited yet again with all these news, why don't we cash in on it a little bit? And so, knowing that all the things I showed you before became a lot more real now...
You think like when the game gets closer to release, they're gonna do a lot more like public betas and just like talking with the community and showcasing the game, or you think they're just gonna like, feels like Valorant didn't really have much of a beta, right? They had one beta, right? And then they basically just dropped the game, right? Meanwhile, there's a game like Ashes of the Creation, which is like, they got Alpha 1, Alpha 2, they had a pre-alpha, they had like a pre-alpha with the Battle Royale, right? Now they're coming up to beta, and then there's gonna be another beta, and then just like they're doing everything like full on transparency, right? Everything is like community input. Steven talks about everything like pretty openly. All of his design choices he's open about, and he discusses with the community and gets feedback. And then Riot is just kind of like, they just kind of working with their heads down, and they're like full NDA. Nobody says anything. Everyone's like got their lips locked, right? And then they're just gonna be like, boom, MMO this November, like freaking whenever it comes out, and then they're just gonna drop it. And it's gonna go crazy. You know what I mean? That seems like more of the Riot game style.
Here's a little bit of a hype piece to tease what this universe can give us.
It's gonna be insane, man. Wow. Oh, dude, that is cool. I don't know where that is, but that's cool. Right. Oh my goodness, dude. The concept art is so amazing. Oh my goodness. What is that, man? I don't know, but it's cool. Oh my goodness. It's so dope. Woof. Sheesh, dude. Look at that guy. God. Whoa. Bro, I want to fight it. Oh my goodness. There's another one. It's just so dope, dude. It's a Tauren. What the hell's that? It's Vel'Koz's uncle. Oh. Oh. What is that? Bro, that's insane, man. There's so much more to the world that like you don't get just from playing League. You just get freaking rage from playing League. You get upsetty spaghetti. You uninstall. You lose. Yeah, it's horrible. Anyways, can't wait for the MMO though.